It's time for the Alien Conspiracy Podcast. We are your hosts, Agent ETA,
Agent Ether,
and Agent Anderson. Come along as we examine UFO sightings, conspiracies, and all things strange. You can follow the show on Twitter at AlienConPod. We also have an email address, alienconpod@protonmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Discord. Links in the description. This week's topic, Machu Picchu. All right. This one makes me think of Pikachu. Machu Pikachu. Pikachu.
I can see that.
not only were the ancient Nazca lines, special to the people, but they represented the Pokemon of the times.
All right, I'll get started with a little bit of an introduction on what is exactly Machu Picchu. This was constructed, or so they believe, sometime in the 15th century. It was constructed by the Incan Empire in the eastern Cordillera. How do you say that? Cordillera? Cordillera? C-O-R-D-I-L-E-R-A?
Whichever comes first.
Cordillera?
Cordillera.
Probably roll something in there too. I don't know. In the eastern Cordillera of southern Peru, on top of a nearly 8,000 foot tall mountain. So it's like way up there. I don't think I've ever been on a mountain that tall. I think maybe
it's high. It's high in altitude, but actually compared to a lot of other sites in Peru, it's actually not that high. Like for example, Cusco is about 11,200 feet in altitude, and Machu Picchu is actually only like 7,970 feet in altitude. So it's actually not that high compared to other areas.
Okay, that seems way up there to me. But they think,
well, it is on the top of a mountain, and it's in a very like heavily forested, like a tropic area. So it's very hard to get to. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Very
secluded area.
And when I read about stuff like this, I'm like, why on earth would you put a settlement of any kind on top of a freaking mountain? Like, let's do it the hard way,
Because they could.
Yeah, I guess so. So it was built around 1450 therearabouts and abandoned around 1532. So it wasn't actually occupied for that long. At least this is what, the archaeologists and the standard story.
Mainstream archaeology.
Yeah. It was used as a royal estate, and there was about 750 people that lived there. So it was not like a big city. It was an estate or like a house or a mansion type deal specifically for like the rulers or the what was his name? I wrote it down.
The elite.
Yeah, the elite. It was for the king, basically, right?
I heard it was like a retreat, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like a spa.
Okay.
Just thinking out loud here.
All right.
I like spas.
Hey, I guess the Incans had spas too. Why not?
Or maybe.
Well, they had running water there, so.
Yeah, they did. They had a lot of running water.
So they had a 12 acre, excuse me. They had a 12 acre farm, or 12 acres of farmland there that was basically terraces built into the side of the mountain. And again, it just like, if you look at pictures of this, it's just the most ridiculous thing. Like, why would you farm there? This is, oh man, maybe those were the people who, instead of sending them to jail, the bad guys, they made them work on the side of a mountain at 8,000 feet altitude.
Well, and I read there was no soil there either. Like they had to haul the soil up from the rich, areas below, bucket by bucket. It's not like it was a good planting area.
No, it's just, it's a strange place to settle, to put down your roots or whatever,
They definitely made it work though. That's for damn sure.
Oh yeah. So it was forgotten over the years, kind of. From what I read, it was forgotten by, I guess, the larger geography, but local people still kind of knew it was there. So it wasn't like forgotten, but just kind of mostly forgotten. But I'm a little fuzzy on that one. Like Agent Ether is probably going to correct me on that in a little bit.
I'll correct you now.
Well, it definitely wasn't. It definitely wasn't forgotten. Well, because like in 1911, when Hiram Bingham showed up there was 3 families that were already living there, like using those agricultural terraces, and because of the like the war between Chile and Peru at that point. Like they just ran away. Like they didn't want nothing to do with anybody that was unfamiliar because they just figured it was a part of that war. You know what I mean? So they ran away supposedly when him and his crew came up there. But that area was being used like and farmers were living there, throughout the era, the years. So
at the
it
same
definitely
time,
was a known site to the locals.
at the same time, it was covered in vegetation, like before Bingham came in and they kind of cleared everything out. It was definitely a lost city in that the entire thing had been taken over and was overgrown. So a lot of it wouldn't have been in use, and it amazes me how quickly that happened.
All right. Before we continue, I just noticed that Agent Kruger is in the audience.
Agent Kruger in the house.
You should be able to
hot dog.
Oh, you should be able to put yourself on the stage, Agent Kruger. While we're at it, I'd like to give a shout out to our live audience here on Discord. If you're unfamiliar, we do live shows generally on Friday nights, and unfortunately, it's a really awkward time, so most people can't show up. But tonight we have Pac-Man 33, Dr. Jackie 04200, Yak.
Jackal.
Jackal. Oh, Jackal. Sorry, my screen is kind of far from me. I apologize. Dr. Jackal 04200, Yak, and
Yak's always
Beowulf.
there, dude. Good old Yak, dude. What's up, Yak?
Beowulf spelled with a V. Beowulf. There you go.
Welcome
to the show.
Shout out.
Hell yeah. So I just did a real quick overview of Machu Picchu, and the other agents were getting into some more of the details, and we pretty much started very recently.
It's true.
For sure.
It's a true thing.
Well, that's kind of lame. I thought we were talking about Pikachu. So
that's what we were saying.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
Machu Picchu. What the fuck?
I spent a lot of time watching cartoons for my Saturday morning cartoon regiment as a kid. And I did a lot of research. I trust you me, I did.
Right,
but just on the wrong thing.
Trust me, all the bowls of cereal I ate were for nothing.
A lot of Lucky Charms.
Cocoa Puffs, my good sir. Fruity Pebbles.
Cocoa Puffs are all right, dude. I could dig that. That's a good solid cereal.
I don't want to sell them short. Last thing I'll say on it is that I remember them being more chocolatey, and I had some Cocoa Pebbles the other day, and oh my god, it's shattering.
Yeah, Cocoa Pebbles is where it's at, dude. Like Cocoa Puffs are good, but as far as like a chocolatey cereal, the Pebbles, brother.
Did you just let the milk sit in there?
I would say yes.
You have to let the milk sit in there.
Well, you don't even have to let it sit in there very long.
Yeah.
By the time you're done with the cereal, it's chocolate milk.
I mean, I have like 6 bowls in between, so it's like I'm gonna get that chocolate milk no matter what. All right, I digress.
Just get like a really big bowl of milk.
Machu Picchu.
To like pour the whole gallon of milk in a bowl, and then just keep adding more and more cereal to get it more and more chocolatey, right?
I just put it in the whole bag, and then I shake it up, and then I poke a hole in it, and then just release all the chocolate milk. Throw the whole bag of mush out. Who needs that?
Or you could put it in a blender with some milk. Make a cocoa.
You know what?
A Cocoa Pebbles shake.
Yeah, I've done that. You know what? I'm sorry to take this on a tangent, but I've taken Fruity Pebbles and I've taken vanilla ice cream and I've blended into Fruity Pebble shake.
Oh, that's
hot
good.
Dog.
That does sound so good. It's not bad. I mean, it's bad for you, but damn it tastes so good.
Oh, sure.
So if you're looking to add weight, hit me up. I know
it's one of life's great delicacies,
right?
Beefcake.
People kill
beefcake.
Beefcake.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's get back to the show. Now, where were we?
Lord only knows.
I completely forget.
We're doing a show?
We're talking
show.
We're talking about
a show, you say.
We were talking about the farming, I think, and then ETA was talking about some farmers that were there, and the war with Chile.
Oh yeah.
And
oh yeah.
Then
fun stuff.
Then I don't know. I could hit the rewind button, but then we'd have to stop to do that.
No, that's when I came in. In. You guys were talking about agriculture and greenery, shrubbery.
So the whole site the whole site is surrounded by agricultural terraces, and the amount of terraces that are present there, they must have been feeding a decent amount of people. And I think one of the more amazing things to me about the site in particular is actually the underlining structure that is below like the megalithic structures that you will see on the top of the surface.
Like the substructures.
Yes, exactly. The substructure. And it states a very high level of sophistication. It really does. Because not only does this substructure divert water away from like the main structures, like because this is an area that receives a lot of high amount of rainfall year to year. So there's a lot of moisture to be concerned about, And so not only does this structure divert water, excess water away from the structures, but it also diverts water towards their their fountain systems and their agricultural terraces. Like it's not the total amount of water they would need to grow plants and stuff, but it definitely helps out. That's for sure.
Yeah,
and
it's very sophisticated.
It keeps the site stable.
Mm-hmm.
It is very, yes. And I'll just kind of lead into one of my opinions here is that I don't believe the Inca themselves were capable of this level of sophistication, to be quite honest. Like, I think that they built upon this site. This is definitely a site they absolutely inhabited. There's no doubt about that.
So you think like the subsurface, the site preparation, that was maybe done by somebody who wasn't the Incas. A
more megalithic culture. Yeah, an ancient culture compared to even the Incas.
And they basically just took somebody else's homework and then just made it their own? Is that what you're saying?
Well, there's a lot of different sites. I mean, even the city of Cusco, you can see the evidence for this. Sacsayhuaman, I mean, it doesn't matter what type of site that you talk about in Peru in particular. There's different levels of architectural sophistication present at most of these sites. And sometimes there's even 3 levels. Like, for example, in Machu Picchu, I think is a perfect example because you have a lot of things are carved like straight out of the bedrock, and we'll get into these different areas within Machu Picchu that are of great importance. But so you have like multiple different levels of sophistication when it comes to architecture at a lot of these sites. You have stuff that is carved out of the bedrock and is usually like aligned towards true north or south or towards astrological, things. But you also have like the more traditional megalithic structures that are not used. They didn't use mortar. There was like bare rock against bare rock, but so highly sophisticated that like you didn't need mortar. They lined up, together so well. You just didn't need that. You know what I mean? Like it was big blocks, with no mortar. And they were put into place very precisely, and the blocks themselves were made very precisely, and then there's another level where you're just kind of fitting blocks together with mortar as well, which isn't Spanish at this site in particular, because the Spanish never discovered this site. It seems like the Inca found this site and they built upon it, and I think they had a great amount of respect for it. It seems like they did, because they didn't move a whole lot of stuff that was already in place, or like if it was out of place, they didn't know where it was supposed to go. So they made stuff around it, but I think built on top of it, but it looks like most of the structures above ground that you will see on this site are probably Inca just because of the type of construction. But then when you see like the bigger blocks and more megalithic type of construction, I believe that to be a different culture. I think it's something that they found and built on top of, you know what I mean?
So
which would actually...
Sorry, pardon me.
Oh, well, I was going to say, it would actually kind of describe why they would even choose a site like this to even build anything upon.
Right, because it already was there. It already existed.
Yeah, it's very remote. It's a difficult site to build anything on, and it's I don't know what, I mean, there's so much more you could say about the site. To be quite honest, I'm a little bit brain farting right now because I was starting to
Now, what would be the nation that, like the civilization that was, attempting to live there or was there before?
Every site in Peru is accredited to the Inca pretty much when it comes to mainstream archaeology.
That's right.
They were
I
a
had a brain fart.
huge empire. They just stretched from like one end to the other, of South America.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of crazy though, because like the Inca Empire that we know of, as far as we know, only lasted about 150 years, a little bit more.
That's true. It was short-lived. And then there were smallpox mostly and war.
Conquistadors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So even the fellow that was accredited to be the discoverer of this site, even though he wasn't the first person to find this site, Hiram Bingham, he himself even described in his book In the Wonderland of Peru. I think it was published in 1913, I believe, but it's called In the Wonderland of Peru. He even described not only observing different levels of like sophistication and stuff with the structures that he was finding, but like he described that like a lot of what he was seeing didn't make a whole lot of sense.
Well, especially when you consider
I forget where I was going with this.
The Incan people, they didn't have a written language. They didn't have iron or steel tools. They didn't even have the wheel.
Oh yeah.
So we're crediting the Incas with this incredible architecture. They would have needed, engineers and architects and stonemasons and artisans. This is something that was planned out. It wasn't built piece by piece. The whole thing was planned out together as one structure. You would have needed gold and silversmiths. It was just huge. It was monumental, this whole undertaking.
The crazy thing is that the Inca were supposed to be a Bronze Age civilization, and supposedly they didn't even have the wheel,
Yeah.
They didn't have a written language. I mean, from what I don't believe that for a second, to be honest.
No.
But supposedly they didn't have a written language. They didn't have mathematics. They didn't have the wheel. They only had Bronze Age tools. And you look at the
sounds
the
like my life.
sophistication.
What are you talking about? That I defy every day. I defy.
But it's funny though, because you look at the sophistication of some of this architecture, and you're like, I mean, at least as far as I'm concerned, I'm like, nah. Whoever built this was very sophisticated. And there's no doubt that they had to have had a written language to accomplish what they did. You'd have to have some kind of a underlying structure to support that sophistication, But going back to what I was saying, though, that book, In the Wonderland of Peru, written by Hiram Bingham, he even said that his opinion of the structure that he was observing had to have taken generations upon generations to build, So the timeline doesn't really line up. If the Inca was only a prevalent civilization in the area for 150 to maybe at the most 200 years, as far as mainstream archaeology is concerned, I don't know. I don't see how they could have had the time to build all these grand structures that we find in Peru,
right?
Not
just Machu Picchu, right? Just not just this area, but all of their temples and the roads. Yeah. We haven't even talked about the 14,000 miles of roads as they expanded their territories that they used to, archaeologists say they used it to move troops. But wow, that's amazing.
The way that the roads were so obviously drawn out, you had to have had, high-level surveyors, people that knew the lay of the land before they even started progress on any kind of a road. They mapped it out, they figured it out, they planned it out, So you'd have to have some sort of a mathematical system, not only that, but, a language to start with. To start with.
I saw these roads and they switch back up these really steep mountains, like the whole mountain. And there's a road all the way to the top. It's amazing.
It's not a matter of just pouring down some gravel and calling it a road. This was a real engineering feat.
No.
And back to the dating of things, the way they date stuff at the sites, they use carbon dating. And they can't actually date the structures or the stones. There's no way to do that. You may be able to estimate like weather wearing on it over time, but even that is a little sketchy. So they'll find artifacts, bones maybe, or leftover things, any organic material, and you can carbon date those.
From what I understand, most of it's pottery.
Yeah, but you can't actually date the structures themselves. So everything is just an estimate. So it seems reasonable. Given the grand scale of everything, it seems reasonable that this stuff could be, like you're saying, either part of another civilization or that they're a little bit off on or way off, actually, on when they think these things were built or how long it took to build them.
Well, and the thing about like this area, like South America in particular, like so for instance, like when we talk about history, like ancient history, even like around like Europe and the Mediterranean, you have multiple different sources from multiple different time periods. People that were stating the fact that they were seeing or whatever they are observing, whatever the statements, wherever they came from, they were stating it from that time period. They lived in that time period. So a lot of the history that we have from like, Europe and the Middle East and a lot of these areas, you have a lot of different sources to go upon. With this, you don't. Like there was so much that was destroyed during like the Spanish conquest. Inquisition. No, that happened in Europe,
No, I
friend.
just love saying Inquisition.
But that conquest, during that conquest, like there was so much that was destroyed. And it appears so much of the population was just plain wiped out by like stuff like smallpox.
Oh yeah, like
there's so much history that
so
was
much
lost.
Of it, like I read anywhere from like 10 million to tens of millions just wiped out. I mean, they're talking about a huge civilization, and in the end, there were only like 600,000 people left.
Wow, that's really depressing.
I mean, that shows like a secluded nation, right? I mean, that sounds like a secluded civilization, not open to foreigners, or at least they just don't get many visitors, So as soon as that,
well, they didn't have a whole lot of people coming from Europe, I'm sure. Up until the first explorers that came there. I think the first explorers that came there, I think they meant no harm. They were just exploring a new area, the new world.
I don't know. What about all that gold?
Well, it's not harm that they meant, unless there were people who were opposing their goals.
They did plenty of harm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
definition of harm.
They did plenty of harm. There's no doubt about that. Within their lust and their greed, yeah, there's no doubt. But I think the first, but I'm not talking about like the conquistadors. I'm talking about the first couple like travelers and that had gone there. They were just trying to find a new world, and they were trying to obviously find different routes for trade too. But they were, they were exploring new worlds, and I think, they definitely didn't want to, probably extinguish entire civilizations with disease, inadvertently, but
yeah,
like,
it was just a blonde-haired dude and a black-haired dude, right? It was just,
they're probably more so likely to be brunette, but whatever.
No, I'm just trying to remember the Disney movie.
Oh,
El Dorado.
I don't think that they were intentionally trying to wipe them out with disease. On the other hand, I don't think they would have been all that bothered with it either, depending on who you're looking at here. I read a book in history class, the Diary of Bernal Diaz, who was one of the conquistadors, and he soft sells a lot of stuff, and he goes over a lot of, he sort of skips over certain things, but he slips a little bit too. Like at one point he's talking about war brides, and the men were all upset because the officers were keeping the best war brides for themselves and stuff like that. I'm like, wait a minute. If your mission is to bring Christianity,
who should get the best war brides?
You what?
I said, if anybody's going to get the best war brides, who should?
But I mean,
they're saying is all.
Their excuse
just
was
saying.
They were under the guise of like bringing Christianity to these, these savages or whatever, but they were not acting as Christians should, that's for sure. Not, I'm not a Christian, but I'm pretty sure that like, sex slavery, I'm pretty sure that that's not like a Christian value. I could be wrong about that, but
no, it definitely is not. Yeah.
as far as I'm aware,
it's crazy because I think, if I'm not, that guy had what the hell is that guy's name? Francisco de Orellana, I think, was the first guy to actually like travel the Amazon, and he actually traveled it from west to east, not east to west. And he described, if I'm not, I'm pretty sure this is a guy. I think what I'm thinking of, but he described, a very vibrant culture that he came across on the Amazon, and it was a gigantic culture of like mound building, and like they also built like a lot of elaborate wooden structures, but they had stone structures as well. And this guy, like, it was around like 1511 or something like that, or I don't remember the exact date, but the stories that he told other Europeans, like they were like, oh, that's not true. Like, what are you talking about? You're talking about a civilization down there in the New World that rivals, like the European civilizations as far as like their technical ability. But the way he described their technical ability was more so like in agriculture and such things, so they weren't technically sophisticated in the same way that Europeans were. You know what I mean? They had taken a different route, as it were. And I think that because the next person that came after him was like a couple hundred years after or something like that, the next explorer. And like they described basically finding nothing. Like they're like, what are you talking about? Like there's no civilizations here. You know what I mean? Weird. But I think what happened was that he inadvertently gave them smallpox or something of the sort. You know what I mean? And it just completely just devastated that civilization. And yeah, by the time a couple hundred years came around, or whenever the next explorer, came around that area, yeah, it had already devastated everything, and the jungle had already reclaimed everything. So you couldn't see what was there, even if it was like 25 feet or 50 feet off the river. You wouldn't be able to see it because everything is overgrown. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's one of the I think that has a great amount of influence when it comes to South America and a lot of like the Inca era civilizations. I think they got hit hard by some of these diseases, and in turn a lot of this history was lost, because a lot of the history that they had down there, it seems at the time at least, it was spoken history. It wasn't necessarily written down, and when it was written down, it was written down on like reliefs and like drawings on the walls and stuff like that. I forget what the technical term for that is, but like that is the kind of stuff that is not going to stand the test of time. You know what I mean? Like if you paint something on the wall, whether it be a depiction, whatever it may be a depiction of, it's not going to last that long. You know what I mean? Because after all, it's paint on a rock. So
right.
It'd have to really have the right situation, the right. There wouldn't have to. You can't have too much moisture. It'd have to be really well preserved. It'd have to be made in the right area, the right situation for it to stand the test of time. So it's no surprise that the majority of this type of thing, like the murals, like for example, like within Aztec culture, within Central America, there have been many murals that have been found depicting, many of amazing thing when it comes to their culture. So that's why we understand a lot of the Aztec culture. And that's not the only thing, but that's one of the things, but like with Inca and stuff, it's even a little bit more ancient. So, like if they were doing the same thing, and it appears like some of it was, like, yeah, it wouldn't stand the test of time. So like, there's no wonder why we don't have that evidence, and not only that, but like we had stated before, a lot of this stuff got destroyed during like the Spanish conquest, because they wanted to make these people Catholic, right? So, if you had a religion that was opposed to that type of thing, they destroyed it,
Yeah, they would actually do that everywhere they went. Yeah. They would destroy all of the native, whatever religious thing they had going on in their particular locale. They would destroy that and put Christian churches in place, or places of worship in the same spot. So they went really far to try and destroy these cultures, which I think is just, the whole thing is just a little bit depressing, that they is so warlike.
Very.
Yeah, the Incas, they They were deeply religious, and it was part of every aspect of their life. It was inseparable from history and politics. They were ruled by someone who was religious, a religious leader. And actually, when they conquered different people, those people were allowed to keep their gods as long as they worshipped also the Inca gods, which I thought was kind of interesting.
It's kind of reminiscent of Alexander the Great with the Greeks. Like when he would take over areas, like for example, Egypt, they didn't take over Egypt as a military conquest. They were able to take them over as a idealistic. Is that the right word? Conquest, whatever. But they were able to mesh their gods with theirs and like come to a common ground, you know. But it's famous. Like Alexander the Great, like a lot of the areas that he would take over in conquest, they would let them keep the same gods. They had no problem with like whatever you worshipped. All right, that's fine, but you're still under our control. But they would also, one of the amazing things I think that is also part of that. I mean, this has nothing to do with Machu Picchu, but they would also catalog and most of like the information that they had, like, you know, religious information or whether it be like geographic or, you know, they would absorb a lot of the intelligence of a culture, you could say, you know, and they would learn. They were more interested in learning, you know, as opposed to subverting, I guess you could say, right?
That's crazy. Yeah.
But yeah, let's get back to Machu Picchu though, because there's plenty to talk about here.
We'll talk about Alexander the Great and his abduction stories in a different episode. Before we continue on though, I just wanted to give a shout out to who suggested this topic, Agent Ether?
Ooh, I'd have to go look. I thanked them in Discord, however.
Yeah, let me check the Discord. I'm pretty sure it was in there.
Oh, who suggested Machu Picchu?
Yeah, somebody suggested Machu Picchu, and I just wanted to give them a shout out real quick. Let me scroll up here.
I saw it too. My goodness.
Oh, Specky Owl, is that it?
Yes.
Yes. All right, so shout out to
Owl,
Specky Owl on Discord who suggested this topic. So thanks for the suggestion. It was a really interesting one. All right, well, let's get back to the show.
Kruger, I appreciate your post in the general chat.
Oh, did you see that?
I just want to say that is epic, and I will definitely be posting it on Facebook and Twitter.
Oh, wait. So inspirational, so empowering.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it looks like. I don't see what's so funny.
I put two different ones. I put one where he went backpacking on his leap year or his gap year. So and you have like this accomplished backpacker.
Well, let's get back to Machu Picchu.
Man, there's going to be a lot of edits
that's
there.
right.
That's what the flag button's for.
Yeah.
Which I have just pressed. All right, where
Machu
were
Picchu.
we?
I don't remember in any way, shape, or form.
My goodness. I have no idea where we were.
Well, let's see. I think we went on a tangent talking about Alexander the Great. And
yeah, we're talking about letting them keep their religion and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, that's right. And
there's
ETA was talking about how he thinks that smallpox erased a lot of the world's history,
which is very interesting.
Yeah, oh, it's sad too, because imagine the cultures
a lot of the
that
history
were lost,
of that area.
You know? Yeah.
I mean, history repeats itself in many different ways, right? That was their version.
But and then I don't think we haven't really talked about a lot of the details. Even like we touched on how
not
like
really.
the blocks at the base blocks are much bigger than the ones above it, and it like ETA was hinting or talking a little bit that it looks like it was almost built by two different people or two different cultures, and the Incas. Given the amount of time they were around and given the technology that they had, it's a little hard to imagine them having moved those big giant blocks. Like it was hard to find the exact measurements, but I found that I read somewhere like the largest ones were up to 300 tons per block, like just these massive blocks. Like how did they get those up there? You know, I don't know, but maybe they had some long lost technology that we don't know about. There's all sorts of directions we could go from here.
I did read one explanation.
Okay.
Acoustic Levitation.
That's what that's what I was actually going to mention next. That's what I was going to mention.
Yes.
Wow, everybody's super excited about
All right,
this
let's do
theory.
it. What do you got for us, Ether?
I can't even talk.
Oh, I arrived on the same premise that I think that a megalithic civilization that predated the Inca actually are the ones that laid like the foundation stones for like this site, and a lot of other sites like there are accredited to the Inca, to be honest, in my opinion. But yes, because that is something that also I think appears to be a possibility in places like the Giza Plateau and other megalithic sites around the world. It seems like they had picked a specific type of stone to use that had like a crystalline structure that could be used in this way. You know what I mean? Either they had like a high level of crystalline structure that was varianted in a different way or a specific way, but also a rock that was high in iron content. But every single site that you find in Peru, most of these sites that you find these large megalithic blocks, they're always quarried from the same area. You know what I mean? Like they don't take stone from multiple different areas and build one site. They only will build one site out of stone taken from one quarry. You know what I mean? Which I find to be very interesting and purposeful. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wonder if there is some significance to that. Like that was a spiritual area and they use those rocks for a specific reason. I don't know.
Well, I think they did. But let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Ether, yes.
Well, also so you're looking at this ancient civilization, but they have advanced technology. So some of the theories would include some sort of acoustic levitation, some sort of gravity technology. And of course, then you get into who were these civilizations. And some people think they were, of course, extraterrestrials who came down and showed these Incas, these people, how to use this technology, or maybe even, built it for them, in fact.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds similar.
Well, because too, you guys know in the burial chambers, they found a lot of elongated skulls, and archaeologists say, well, that's a result of binding. And that's a very good idea. If you look like right now in China, I guess round heads are really popular. So have you guys read this? They're molding children's heads to be round in shape.
What the hell?
Yeah, it was like in
Really?
the news. So, I mean, binding does work. So they think among maybe the elite or religious leaders, they could have bound their heads to have these elongated skulls, but they've definitely found them.
So, yeah, but it's always, you do hear that what accompanies that exact expression that you just mentioned was, it's amongst the elite and the higher ups, if you will. But I mean, it's also known to be, a tribute to what they depict as a god, or in our case, an extraterrestrial.
What exactly are they mimicking?
Well,
in other words, in this binding?
Exactly.
Yeah, I feel that
exactly. Yeah. Well, and I think some of the more famous elongated skulls were found in Paracas, Peru, as a matter of fact. And it's very interesting because you find different qualities of quote unquote elongated skulls, and some of them, no doubt that they have been boarded. It's a case of somebody that had their cranium manipulated from birth to form a different shape. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it should be known that they did not have a long life. Those craniums that, like that was a deformity that you were placing upon.
You can imagine the type of influence, negative influence that might have on somebody's physical condition throughout their life, right?
Well, it's just like an ancient...
The thing that is extremely important to note, there actually has been quite a few studies on these elongated skulls. And the main difference between like a skull that was boarded from birth to represent an elongated skull, and between that and something that actually appears to be a skull that was elongated from birth. So somebody that was born with an elongated skull. There's telltale signs that you can draw from measurements of these skulls. And the main thing is going to be cranial capacity. So the ones that are boarded from birth and are made to represent or imitate an elongated skull, you'll find that the cranial capacity, as far as like how big their brains were, how big the inside of their skull was, to how much space was there to form a bigger brain, I guess you'd say, right? The boarding will be the exact same as any other Homo sapien that you'll find, but there have been quite a few skulls that were found with the capacity was not just like 10% above like the normal Homo sapien capacity for their skull, but some of it is considerably higher, like at least like 50 to 100% like more capacity for a brain than, and it's not just that either. It's not just like the internal capacity for the size of a brain that this skull may have housed. It's not just that. It's also the different suture, within a skull, you're going to have different suture lines as far as like how the skull
the different bones come together,
exactly how they come together and how they form, especially like in adolescence, right?
Yeah.
But that's such a hard, that's so brutal to think about it. It's just, intentionally.
If you're being boarded, yeah, but some of these skulls, though, it doesn't seem like they were boarded, though. Like it seems like they formed very naturally. And not only did they have an increased, internal capacity for brain mass, but they also had different suture lines. And like, all right, so Agent Ether, I think you probably know more about this than I do, but like the different like lines in which like the regular like Homo sapien skull will like fuse together in adolescence and how it grows into adulthood.
Right, because when you're born, your skull's growing very rapidly.
Developed very differently.
Yeah, when you're younger, you have these sutures.
Yeah.
Right, and the bones actually. So when you're
that's a perfect example, Beowulf.
So when you're first born,
I just want to throw that
the
out
bones can move. They have to be able to move. They have to be soft, and they can't be. The sutures can't actually connect the bones very strongly because you have to be able to get through the birth canal. And then, as an adolescent, you're growing very quickly. So again, you can't have a cranium that is, a solid cranium. So things start to fuse together when you stop growing as you become an adult.
Yeah. And not only that, you look at dental like records or like the dental evidence. Some of these skeletons that have been found in Peru around like especially around the Caracas area, or Paracas, I'm sorry. But like some of these like skeletons that have been found with elongated skulls have a very like small like skeleton as far as like their torso and like their legs and stuff and hips and stuff like that, but their head will be very large, like almost the same size as their torso, but at the same time, hold up now. Like, all right, so most of these skeletons have been described as being, either somebody who is like 1 or 2 years old, maybe a couple years older than that even. But like the ones that have been labeled as being like infants a lot of them have fully developed like teeth, like a fully developed like teeth structure with even like wisdom teeth and stuff, and like it doesn't make any sense that they would have that developed teeth, at that age. Like,
that is interesting.
That's one of the big red flags, like
least.
For me at least, when we're talking about these skeletons, these creatures, whatever you want to call them, because it doesn't seem like they're the same thing. You know what I mean? Like, and it seems like people that a lot of the burial sites that you find these elongated skulls in, a lot of times it will be buried in a way that was giving respect to them. Like they were obviously part of a higher class of culture. It's not the normal type of burial, that like for lack of a better word, a peasant or something like that would be buried under, you know what I mean? So, like, not only the objects that they're buried with, but in the manner that they're buried. And a lot of these skeletons are found mummified, which takes a great amount of effort and a great amount of knowledge in order to mummify a body. All right, it's not something simple. You know what I mean? And a lot of these bodies are mummified, like the time in which they were mummified. Sorry, I'm starting to stumble my words now here, but the time in which they were mummified is actually before like Egyptian times, and it's also far removed from Egypt, obviously. So how do they have the same technology, or why were they were following the same type of burial ritual?
Right. What kind of
That's a very
connection?
good
What kind of
point.
connection was there, and how could there be a connection?
Well, there could be,
Yeah.
Well, I mean, shit. There's so many damn different connections that you may draw upon, like the structures, just the structures in Peru alone. As far as like how they are like oriented in certain ways. Like whether they be oriented towards like true north or south, or like some astrological orientation or something. But there's a lot of different correlations you can draw upon for sure. Shit with art. So one of the first ones that actually like comes up to mind to me, to be honest, is have you ever seen a megalithic structure that has 3 doorways as far as an entrance?
Oh, sure. I got one
You
in my
ever seen
backyard.
that? I have, yeah. I've seen it everywhere, right? 3 different doorways. The middle one is always the biggest. The one to the left and the one to the right is usually the same size, but they're very equally distributed, and this to me seems to be indicative of the notion of well, it ties into like a couple different things, but like
Hey, you're not kidding. There's a place that's next to me called Triangle Square, and they only have 3 entrances because it's a triangle.
well, okay, so the left
Makes
entrance,
Just just as a little bit of a tangent,
yeah.
I actually saw way back in the day before they were huge. I saw No Doubt play a show at Triangle Square. Like they just did a little show up there. Like I didn't even know who they were. I drove down there with some friends and we saw them play. They were just like right there. Like I could have walked up and grabbed their guitar or whatever. Like there was no stage or anything. It was crazy. And then they got really famous
Nice.
shortly thereafter. But it was, dude, they are so good live. So good live. But anyways, I digress.
That 3 entrance that I talk about is heavily related to Masonic tradition. So the left entrance represents the masculine or the sun. The right entrance represents the feminine or the moon, right? And this isn't talking about like male or female like traits necessarily. It has much more to do with like the like with the yin and the yang of existence. And this is a reoccurring theme throughout every ancient religion that I know of, and every ancient religion that has influenced architecture, to be quite honest. The middle entrance way represents like like enlightenment, I guess you could say. The marrying of the 2 images into a perfect form. You know what I mean? And you find this reoccurring theme throughout all megalithic structures, as far as I've seen. It's quite an amazing thing, I think. And you find that in Peru, you find that in Egypt, you find it in the Middle East, you find it in China, you find it in Thailand, everywhere, dude. Every freaking where you will find that similar trait being common in architecture. So I don't think it's necessarily like a Masonic thing in particular, but it might be closely related to Masonic tradition as far as most people are concerned nowadays, because of the information that we have, active, to draw upon, But I think it's at the very least a symptom of a far more ancient religion, maybe, or culture that has influenced. It is a worldwide culture that influenced everything around it. You know what I mean? Like, and potentially, maybe let's just say potentially, like maybe possibly the Younger Dryas era was the era that this happened in. I'm just saying maybe human culture was had a bit of an intervention when it comes to natural disaster. You know what I mean? Maybe there was a natural disaster that interrupted freaking everything, and we had to start anew, right? We had to hit the reset button, right? As a species, as a culture, whatever you want to call it.
I mean, you look at the sediment layers within Earth. I mean, if you take a geology class, you understand that the world has been through cataclysmic events more than once. And life was, carbon. I mean, like I said, if you just look at the sediments and you look at what the world has been through, it's been through a hell of a lot. And we've been here for a hell of a long time. So it's a fascinating dive in itself, geology, and just the learning about how old our world is. And, geology is awesome. I love it, but scary as hell. It makes you feel like an ant.
Well, it's pretty well accepted that like the Homo sapien form that we, have right now has been around for at the very least 300,000 years, at the very least, right? I think it's been around for a little bit more than that, potentially, maybe even much more, but like, just think about it. 300,000 years with the cranial capacity and the intelligence that we have right now. I think it's more than possible, that there are ancient civilizations that have been erased by natural catastrophes that we just have no idea ever existed because the history hasn't made it to our mind. It hasn't stand the test of time.
Right.
Just think about like stuff like glaciers. Like think about North America and just like in the Younger Dryas era, just 11,000 plus years ago, how much damage and how much destruction must have been caused by that natural event. I mean, this natural event spanned quite a few hundred years, you know what I mean? But like anything that was under any of those glaciers, any structures.
Well, we've been, yeah.
Well, look at all the megalithic structures that we have now. They're all made out of stone, which seems to be very like, obvious. I mean, it was made on purpose like that.
I mean, the world did go through a glass station event. I mean, if you even go to Kansas, you can find permafrost. I mean, and stuff like bulks of ice, that land masses of chunks of ice just swept through the lands. The dating is completely off, but I mean, you can't not entertain the idea though that there was something before a huge, cataclysmic event that just completely wiped out, a way of life that, was just the routine. I mean, hell, as we know it, we could be erased at a moment's notice, whether it be, due to a volcano or, a wizard caldera.
Well, I think it's more likely a meteor or possibly, quite possibly, an extremely violent solar flare.
Well, just put it on the list. You have so much. Our ozone going out, we just have like even we could freeze to death again. Hell, we could actually kill ourselves with our nuclear arsenal. So we've created the power to kill ourselves. I mean, whether it be from the natural sun or our own man-made sun, it's truly beautiful, but also really fucking scary at the same time. So it's I don't know. This is the world we live in. I hope we don't see that day though.
Something like a solar flare, especially right now, I think would be super, super like scary because like our power grid is not set up to defend against something like that. You know what I mean? Like if a solar flare of substantial size hit like North America, for example, like we'd be drawn right back into the freaking dark ages, because everything electrical would be pretty much destroyed.
But we would have amazing northern lights. So,
well, and just think about it. If we lost our current infrastructures for whether, power grids and all that other stuff, and, we didn't have all the transportation, forget about getting your Xbox or PlayStation. How many people here know enough to grow food for themselves, just themselves, we would be in a lot of trouble. Society would collapse and it'd be like a zombie movie, but without the zombies, people would be the zombies, it would be bad. But to Agent ETA's earlier point about which about which structures would survive and which, the stones ones that are survived. Just, I don't know if you guys have ever done any repairs to your house, but my house, if underneath of the paint of the walls, the entire house is made of like, if you've ever worked with drywall, it's like chalk. It's like, that's, that's not going to last any amount of time at all. It's going to last, a couple hundred years at best. There might be something left, but there's not going to be something 10,000 years from now. Not a chance,
Or shingle that's like a thin layer of, just tar and rubber. So yeah.
Yeah, so I really like that
I've done
point.
my own roofing. It's a hell of a thing.
Because if we were the same as if we were the same biologically for 300,000 years, I could go back 300,000 years and there'd be if I could speak the same language, I could have a conversation with these people. They'd have the same abilities, the same mental faculties and everything. And I think we talked about this before on a previous episode about Göbekli Tepe, which, by the way, Göbekli Tepe, built out of stone. The only reason it's still there is because they filled it. They backfilled it. If they hadn't buried it, it would not be there anymore. It would be completely eroded away. And
it seems like the people that buried it did it on purpose.
Yeah.
Because, well, who knows why? Because, but like it seemed like they knew about something upcoming that they would need to preserve, or for whatever reason they wanted to preserve this site.
But that was only like 10,000 years ago, right? And I say only, but I mean only, that was only 10,000 years ago. And the only reason that was there is because it was buried and they're rediscovered. So if it hadn't been buried, it would have been erased, right? And that's only 10,000 years. Now go back 300,000 years. Just imagine what humankind has achieved and then has lost. Like we know from the genetic record, there's like the genetic bottleneck where they think that there was only like 3,000 people left on the planet at one point. So we've definitely been through some cataclysms, but until they find some sort of archaeological record of it, it doesn't exist for us. But I think that there's no way we were around for 200 or 300,000 years and we were just, banging rocks together for that whole time. It just doesn't check out. There's no way at all.
It makes no sense.
Yeah, no sense.
And to fact correct, actually, to Agent ETA's point earlier, you were mentioning about like 600,000 years, you were saying about how far Homo sapiens have been around, but it was it's been 200,000, I guess, the most recently like recognized Homo sapien that was found in East Africa.
Really?
No, I'm just saying like it was just 200, but I'm just saying like, but it also like that's just what we found. So to something that's been completely obliterated, and there's no record at all. So it's, there is that possibility. So
the Clovis first doctrine was like the accepted, timeline that most archaeologists, had in North America, they all thought that like human civilization had come across the Bering Land Strait pretty much, and then populated down through North America from that. You know what I mean? It doesn't seem to be at all, the possibility because of DNA research that has gone on in South America and stuff, which shows a lot of Aboriginal DNA and also like Tongan and other like Pacific Islander DNA like comes up often in South America. So it would seem that like the Clovis first doctrine is very false. We did not come through the Bering Land Strait and populate North America and South America in turn. You know what I mean? It does not seem to be the case at all. And also down in San Diego, as a matter of fact, and I think I've mentioned this in previous episodes. I forget what episode. But there was actually an archaeological site that was found in San Diego, and I forget what off ramp it was. They were constructing an off ramp for a freeway, and they found an archaeological site, and it actually predated the Clovis by quite a bit. I forget what the hell it was. It was like 200,000+ years or something like that from today. That they carbon dated some of these organic materials that they found, but they found mammoth bones that were obviously processed by human hands and by human like knives and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And they found certain like campfire sites, I guess you'd say, where they cooked these meats and stuff like that. And they found arrowheads and stuff like that. And in a very specific layer, sedimentary layer, there's evidence out there that even in North America, at least 200,000 years plus, there has been Homo sapiens with the same cranial capacity that we have nowadays present in the site. You know what I mean? Whether they were very advanced, it doesn't seem like they were very, very advanced, but they were there. You know what I mean?
We're shown the way to be advanced. We're given the opportunity to advance.
Hey, you know what? That
can't
that could
rule
be,
it out, man.
Well, that could be possible. All right. So like when you talk about like Aztec or Inca, mythology, whatever it is, whether you talk about like Viracocha or Quetzalcoatl, for example, like there were two different individuals that were described as being, figures that brought back society after a great catastrophe. You know what I mean? And like that's a common trait within some figures throughout many different civilizations and religions throughout the world. And it seems to me a lot of these figures, were molded and then in turn described after the fact, as a part of trying to remember what had happened.
I think that's an episode onto itself, alien intervention, or some sort of, coming in or guidance or not, I don't mean it in one direct way, but I just, just in some form or fashion of stepping in and guiding us the right way. Now, whether that be the case with Machu Picchu, that would be, I would like to think that, something like that happened.
Oh, that's right. I forgot we're talking about Machu Picchu. Huh?
Steer us around. Let's get us around.
Let's get back to the show. That's right. We had a topic. No, but that's cool, man. It's all about the tangents. You know what I mean? There's a lot of, we have really only just scratched the surface of what is at this specific site. For example, there's the Inahuata stone, Nihuatana, Inahuatana stone. And this one is lined up to perfectly with the winter solstice. And the name itself means to tie up the sun. And this is just one of the many things the strange things at the site. And we've talked about it before, but it's, if you're going to line something up to the winter solstice, you got one chance, So how did they do this so precisely if they didn't have like a written language or anything? Because you would need knowledge of prior years. You would need math. You would need geometry. You wouldn't be able to do this with a culture that just had spoken word. So the fact that they have something like this, to me, means that this culture was probably a lot more sophisticated than we give them credit for. And that's just on the surface layer. Like, we're not talking about the potential that this had influences of previous cultures or, anything else like that was going on. But there's a lot of, we've only just scratched the surface of what's going on at Machu Picchu.
I mean, it's referred as a lunar observatory point, that's.
And another thing that I thought Agent Ether was going to touch on this when she started talking about it, but there's a story of when, I wrote my notes. My notes are in the other room, unfortunately, but what was the name of the leader, the Incan leader who lived in this city? I forget his name, which I should have gotten my notes. I'm sorry, people, but he was
Atafuela.
Yeah, there's a story where he was levitating. He levitated stones and used that to defeat an army. And it sort of goes along with this idea that they had some sort of higher technology. Now, there's ideas that the gods, aka aliens, gave them this technology, or maybe it's something that they had because their culture is older than we think. But it's just an interesting idea that we have this legend passed down that is sort of, I mean, it's not hard evidence, but it is really, really interesting because it has turned out in the past that these stories, something we thought was just a story, turned out to be based in fact. So I'm not saying this is evidence, but I'm saying that it is kind of interesting that there are stories of being able to levitate rocks within this culture.
Or melt rocks.
I didn't come across stories of melting rocks. Did you?
One of the gods that they venerated or whatever was supposedly able to. It was a bird god that was able to melt stone with his beak and then reform it into the form that he wanted.
Okay.
And Inca. What the hell was the name of that? Chiku Inca Yaquenta or some shit. I forget. I'm trying to draw from memory here. I forget the name of the damn freaking thing.
Something we won't be able to pronounce, I'm sure.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that description.
Yeah,
but I could be confusing it also with like a Aztec mythology, maybe. I don't know.
Just like sightings that we've talked about in this show, where we see so a lot of the sightings we've talked about have happened in either North America or like a English speaking nation, because that's kind of like the reports we have access to. But those, when they see something weird, they relate it to their own culture. They describe it in terms that they know. I mean, obviously, but like I mentioned before, like if you see something that's like football shaped, you call it a football, because that's what it looks like to you. But if you see something that's like this bizarre stone melting stuff, you don't know what it is. You might describe it as like a bird using their beak to melt the stone, because that's the only way you can rationalize it to yourself within your own cultural framework, So that's like, it seems to me interesting, because if you're going to think of a story of somebody melting stone, which maybe you're thinking about hot lava or something, because it's a geologically active area, but why would you think of it being done with a bird's beak? I mean, of course there are people who are very creative, and it's not that much of a stretch to think that they had a creative, storyteller that came up with this idea. That's not out of the question at all. But on the other hand, it's fun to think, what if it wasn't somebody who created this story, but rather something that they witnessed, and they witnessed it and then they retold the story within their own cultural framework, which might have been, instead of like some sort of machine or something, might have been described as like a bird with, using their beak. I just kind of like to imagine, what if with these kinds of things. All right. Well, I feel like we've only just begun on the topic. I feel like we've only scratched the surface, but we're getting on towards we're over an hour by now. So I think it's about time to wrap it up for this week's episode. Any final thoughts on Machu Picchu or the topic in general?
Well, I'd just like to mention that you can go and see 200 artifacts in Florida at the Boca Raton Museum. And they also have this new immersive augmented reality experience where you're like in a theater and you're in the chair. It's kind of like virtual reality. And you also can like walk around. They're kind of keeping it under wraps, but I get the impression it's kind of like that Monet exhibit they have where you can see all the paintings, or they do it for Van Gogh too, where you walk through and they just blow up the paintings and they're like on the walls and they're moving. I think it's kind of like that. So you're doing this virtual tour of Machu Picchu. It sounds really fun. So if you're in Florida, it's running through March, and then it's going to kind of, travel around the world to different museums and stuff. So you can keep an eye out for it and see if it's coming to your area.
Wow, that sounds awesome.
Uh-huh.
Unfortunately, that's on the other side of the country for me. It's a little far.
But it being virtual, can I like tune in, with my VR headset? That'd be awesome.
I don't think you can. No, I think you can look at the artifacts though online. There's 192 of them, and they've never been exhibited outside of Peru before.
Have you checked out some of the artifacts?
I did. Very interesting, and a lot of them are golden artifacts. They had their sun god, who was a humanoid figure, and it was depicted like on a plate, and there would be like flames coming out. Gold was very important to the Inca culture. They thought of it as like the lifeblood or the sweat of the gods, and they would gild everything, including like the temple walls, in gold. So a lot of these artifacts are gold and silver related.
And that in that itself could be related to, extraterrestrials, because from what I've read in the past, that being a fuel source or something of a commodity.
And I'd say if I had to wrap it all up, I'd say that it's definitely a strange place, and I would love to go visit there in person. And I actually, usually I can come up with some sort of conclusion or other, or some sort of thoughts, but like I don't even know what to think about this place. It's sort of, I don't know, it's still sort of undecided about what I think about any of this stuff. I'm just sort of fascinated by the area in general. But there does definitely seem to be some weird things going on here. Agent Ether, do you have any final thoughts?
Just, wrapping it up, talking about the museum. I thought that'd be interesting.
All right. Well, that about wraps it up for this week's episode. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, you could really help us out by giving us a good review wherever you listen to podcasts.
And don't forget to subscribe, like, and review. Keep it strange.